Bonjour, and welcome into The Cave, the podcast where we dive deep into song lyrics that resonate with our personal experiences. I am Julia, your host. In each episode, we take a closer look at a specific part of a song's lyrics, unpacking the emotions and stories they evoke, and connecting them to our own lives. Whether you're here to find comfort, understanding, or simply a shared moment of reflection, I'm glad you're here. Today, we are going to talk about a line written by an iconic band, Alexisonfire. In rough hands, we can hear, sometimes love isn't about how much someone suits you, but how much you're willing to change to suit them. When I saw them play in Munich, I was really hoping they would play this song, and when they did, it was pure magic. This band was one of the first I got into when I started exploring this genre, and even now, some of their songs are still among my all-time favorites. They are known for their high-energy songs, but this one has a calmer vibe, which makes it stand out even more. It's the perfect closing track for Crisis, which is an incredible album. This song was released in 2006, and this year was such a good year in terms of music release. If you know, you know. And maybe I listened to it for the first time in 2008, something like that. So when I was 15, 16 years ago. I changed a lot in 16 years, and in different phases of my life, I went through, oh, this line is so true and romantic, to, no, if someone doesn't love you the way you are, they are not for you. Now, I am more balanced. Because what does it mean to change for someone in a relationship? Is it about losing yourself? Or can it be a path to becoming a better version of yourself? And I think the line between those two is very thin, depending on the type of relationship that you are in. I don't believe anymore in the fact that someone should accept everything that you are and find you perfect, in a way that we all have flaws, and it is about taking ownership of them. It is just too easy to say, this is how I am, take it or leave it. Your flaws cannot excuse your bad behavior, but at the same time, you shouldn't go against your tastes and values. I once heard in Cheria Kerinsky's podcast Bib Sonore that being in a relationship is all about making compromises and not sacrifices, and I could not agree more. I have examples of me being on both ends of that spectrum, between losing yourself and becoming a better version of yourself. I had my first real boyfriend at 16. I stayed with him for 6 years. I molded a lot of my young adult personality from it. If he didn't like something, then me neither. For example, and I feel very bad for saying this, but for a very long time, I convinced myself that Underoath album Disambiguation was bad, just because he said so. Listening to it now, it absolutely slaps. And most of the time he, so me too, was thinking this about a new song because the band has gotten softer or had more clean vocals than before. Now look at me loving anything melodic way more than breakdowns. Is it out of pettiness? But it was like that on other topics too, like people or lifestyle. If I told him about a project that I had, he would be very negative about it, and even though he wouldn't directly tell me not to do it, I would lose the confidence too. And I am now only realizing that he wouldn't change for me. Or I guess he did in 6 years, but with less compromises than I did. I love going outside, but we would never do it together, or barely. He wouldn't want to meet my friends. So yes, I did change for him, but it was sacrifices, not compromises. And this only works both ways. However, I also want to add that he was not someone bad. He never told me what to like or not. I just didn't have a lot of self-confidence and thought that it would be the only way for him to still love me. In return, but this I realized way later, he also lacked self-confidence, but showed it differently, by faking it way too hard and being very judgmental. I still have this judging habit from time to time, but I definitely lost a lot of it. Also, little by little, I had resentment that built up towards him, because deep down I was missing on all of those things and I was not being my full self. So of course it could only end one day or another. Now, 8 years later, I am with someone who always supports me, no matter what I do. He got super excited when I told him about this podcast idea. By the way, that's him who wrote and recorded the intro and outro music. And he took a lot of his time setting everything up for me and explaining how I can record and edit the episodes. and also just listening to me talking about it, never making me feel like I am going to fail. He doesn't try to change me. However, when he doesn't like something I do, he tells me, and most of his arguments are valid. And this is normal, this is just communicating. Then it's up to me to take actions to change, so it's not as hard for him. Receiving critics is very hard for me. With my lack of self-confidence, I take it hard and assume that this means the person loves me less, or that I am worthless and not good enough for them. And I know it's not true, but in the past I used to adapt so hard just to be loved, and I don't want to do that, so it triggers the old me. But this is my problem, not my partner's. And in exchange, when there is something I don't like, he also takes action. But it took longer since I wouldn't say anything. Good thing that man has passions and a big heart. One of those actions I took to be better was definitely going to therapy, as I mentioned in the first episode. For those who haven't listened to it, I tend to go quiet when I am upset, whether it is about someone or just depending on how I feel. When I completely shut down, I am not only hurting myself, but also the ones around me, and especially my partner. He cannot read my mind and thinks that this is related to him, which is completely understandable. And I couldn't even tell him what I needed or what was up because sometimes I couldn't put words into it. I also realized that depending on our different educations or culture, me being French and him German, there were things he would do that I did not approve of, or the opposite. And yes, even though the countries we were born in are neighbors, we can still notice some cultural differences. And I realized that they were not the stereotypes that we could think of. You would think German people would be more direct. Well, have you heard of the brutal honesty of French people? This, combined with the fact that in France we use polite forms way more often. So those two, mixed with my people pleaser tendencies, are not a good match together. Just as an example, I was at first uncomfortable when he would go to a person in a store, for example, to ask a question without saying hello properly. Just asking the question directly. Because I didn't know that in Germany it was completely acceptable, just straight to the point, as long as you're still being polite. Try this in France, and the person won't reply to you until you've said hello. This is a very anecdotic event that didn't even have any impact on our relationship. But just to give you an overview on how even those small things can be disturbing at first, even for two countries who are this close. I actually also realized that this is my anxiety showing off, but still you understand the thing. We both reflected on it and met halfway, where we corrected our behavior, always in the view of it not being a sacrifice, and the other would just reflect on why does it bother me and is it so bad? But still, it is always a work in progress. As long as we both try to do better, we are on the right path. So, is there such a thing as soothing someone? We all have our taste for a partner, but first of all, are those good for us? Depending on our attachment style, we can create and recreate patterns that do not lead to healthy relationships. For example, people with an anxious or avoidant attachment can find themselves with partners who can be inconsistent or neglectful. To, I guess, unconsciously having an easy way out. And once a pattern is set, even though we want to change it, change can be scary. So trying to go with another way would just make us wonder, what's the catch behind this? Also, I often wondered where we say opposites attract, but also birds of a feather flock together. I understand how both are different and can be complementary, but still we can see all the complexity of relationships. Maybe for a short time you can rely on chemistry and attraction, but for a long-term relationship, communication is definitely the key to being the perfect person, or should I say, a better person for your partner. And I also think that's what Alexisonfire means with this line. At least I interpret it that way. You shouldn't rely on just someone being perfect for you. It can feel like it in the beginning, but if you want to make it last, you have to work through it together. It means having the tough conversations and being open to receiving constructive criticism. And if both persons are willing to make those changes, or should we even call them adjustments, then we can talk about a solid relationship. Because this is also what this is about. No one will suit you 100%. And as the people in the relationship evolve, the percentage of suitability evolves too. Then, if you are willing to change, to make compromises, to discuss with this person, you make the effort to stay in this relationship, if you consider it worthwhile. In the end, it's maybe about being with the person who would be worth stepping out of your comfort zone for. The person who will be the one who makes it easier to go out of your cave. And always keep in mind that if you are the only one making those changes, a discussion needs to be had to determine if they are worthwhile or not. When we lack self-confidence, we can often ask ourselves if we are good enough for someone. But if we are the only one making changes and adjusting, trying to be better for the other, it's maybe the other person that is not good enough for all those changes without giving anything back in return. But I know how hard it can be while being in the relationship. This is something I often realize once I am over the breakup, when I would need to realize it during the relationship. And what about you? Have you ever felt like you needed to change in a relationship? Or that you were changing too much? Or not enough? Did you feel like losing yourself? Or like you were just becoming a better version of yourself? Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you relate to it, that it could help and give you some keys to understand better your relationships with others, but also with yourself. Please subscribe and follow me on Instagram at IntoTheCavePod. You can also share with me which lyrics you relate to the most. I would love to hear those. I will see you again next week with new hard-hitting lyrics. Be kind to yourself. Bye!